He's been everywhere on my TV this weekend in the mere seconds that he's not on TV somewhere else. Let's hurry. Frank Figliuzzi, author of The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence, national security contributor for NBC, and of course, assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI. Frank Figliuzzi. Hello, Frank.
Good morning, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for dealing with us here at COVID Central. We three of us have COVID, so that's why we're all remote here. But
I'm just glad that you're well and recovering.
Thank you, honey. Thank you. So, Frank, I mean, you've made so many great points on TV and on Twitter, of course. You were talking about how the FBI is finding and arresting the people who breached the Capitol building and what new steps law enforcement are taking to protect events on Inauguration Day. That seems key. Talk to us about that. Why should this whole thing not be inside and virtual, given the circumstances?
All right. So we've got a number of very complicated things going on that converge to become a perfect storm at the Capitol. Number one, we're learning from NBC News as recently as yesterday evening through their public reporting that the FBI shared the intelligence concerns with the Capitol Police and with the Washington Metropolitan Police, as did the New York Police Department. And there you have that. Now, we're also understanding that the FBI disrupted the travel of, quote, over a dozen predicated active investigation subjects that were considered the baddest of the bad. And they did that in what I'm hearing was what we called, in my day, a knock and talk. A knock and talk is not a nice cup of coffee and chat in the backyard. It's, do you understand you are this close to getting arrested? We are watching you, and if you get in a car, bus, or plane to D.C., that will be the final probable cause to put you in handcuffs. Is there anything unclear about what I'm telling you? So what we're hearing is that went on and prevented, allegedly, most of the senior leadership of any organized plot from attending. So as horrible as this was, it's possible that this could have been even worse. And then lastly, what we're seeing right now and what's going on in every one of the 56 field offices is they are buried under an avalanche of social media posts where everybody from the guy on his couch eating potato chips to an actual bad actor is aspiring or talking about blowing up D.C., traveling, killing police, killing politicians, and they've got to separate the wheat from the chaff, the aspirant from the actual executor of an act. And this is a nightmare for law enforcement.
Yeah. So the FBI tells the only knock-knock joke that's not funny, is your point.
Right.
Yeah, bingo. Who's knock-knock? Who's there? Handcuffs.
Yeah, FBI. No, there's no joke. Okay. So Frank, obviously there's a lot of concern about not only January 17th, but the inauguration. And I want to get your take on, as we were saying earlier, it seems like there's a lot of cover your ass going on, right? The outgoing Capitol Police Chief said the House and Senate security officials hamstrung his efforts to call the National Guard. Clearly, there was a problem at the Pentagon, right, with getting authorization for the National Guard. What is your early take on what exactly happened here and why?
Yeah, I don't want to sound too conspiratorial because I am just the facts, ma'am, kind of guy. But I have to tell you, my gut tells me there's more to this than simply the Capitol Police not understanding the threat. And I think that ultimately we're going to need hearings in Congress to get to the bottom of what in God's name happened. So if intel was shared, look, I was sitting at home for the past 2 weeks seeing this play out on Parler and Twitter, and so we need answers as to why this happened, why the National Guard was constrained. Now, I'm hearing some obvious excuses being given by, for example, the D.C. mayor understandably saying, I don't want the bad optics of militarized troops in my city like we saw in the debacle where President Trump crossed the street to get to a church with a Bible in his hand. I don't want that. I get that. But when I hear the Capitol Police saying, well, we just didn't understand the threat, no. And becoming less credible as we hear that they received intelligence. And then this whole Pentagon position about National Guard not being permitted, we need serious answers. And until we get them, there will remain this theory that politics and the White House entered into this. And look, part of that conspiracy is, why did Trump replace people at the top of the Pentagon? Why did Bill Barr leave the AG post at DOJ? Where in God's name is Chad Wolf at DHS? So lots of questions, very few answers.
I know I did read that in the Washington Post story this morning, Frank, about, they're afraid of the optics. It's weird that they don't seem to be concerned about that when black people are involved. They didn't seem to be concerned in Lafayette Square or for the George Floyd protests that it looked like Fallujah, and suddenly when it's white Trump supporters, they're like, oh, eek, we can't wear white after Labor Day, and we're afraid what this might look like. I mean, it's, I think you're right. There is going to be a lot more that comes out. I mean, first of all, this QAnon congresswoman or woman tweeted Nancy Pelosi's location. Mm-hmm. I mean, I clearly it appears, and again, I know what you mean, Frank, about, obviously members of Congress are not conspiratorial, that are saying they had to have inside help here, whether it's from Congress people or from, members of the Capitol Police. I mean, who knows? But how would they know the location of all those offices? As an FBI agent, wouldn't that be the first thing that makes you go, the things that make you go, hmm?
Yeah, so what we saw inside that building was a combination of a handful, and thank goodness only a handful of people who looked like they knew what they were doing and headed to the right place, guy with flexi cuffs, right? And that. And then the massive mob going, whoa, I just got myself into the Capitol as part of an angry mob. So it was less organized than it could have been, perhaps because the FBI intercepted some people lawfully. But moving forward, we've got to understand we're entering into a volatile 2-week period. The inauguration is coming. There's a race against the clock for the FBI to take down the most violent bad actors before they head to the inauguration, and to build the strongest cases they can, and maybe take an enterprise theory of investigation, which is this could be an opportunity to take down a group or organization, maybe the Proud Boys. And so you'll see quick arrests on complaints, and then you may see superseding grand jury indictments that tackle this as a group enterprise.
Can I say thank you to you and Malcolm Nance and Naveed Jamali and a lot of our friends? You have been, calling the alarm for a long time. There is no reason, on TV, not exactly surreptitiously. And, you also wrote a piece, Frank, as you do, looks at the bigger picture that's even more terrifying. You said Trump's latest betrayal of America sends a clear message to foreign adversaries. What happened to our democracy that day was not an intelligence failure. It was a failure to act upon available intelligence. And as you said, I keep saying I have no quarter for these people going, no one could have seen this coming. As you said, we all saw this coming. Anyone who spends any time assessing social media threats of violent domestic extremists knew the Proud Boys, violent militia groups, QAnon quacks, others loyal to the president, more loyal to the president than our nation, were planning travel logistics, talking about overwhelming the Capitol Police, attaching the hashtag Storm Congress to their planning posts. And you say, while we ponder the vulnerability that followed from a failure to act on clear warning signs, there's an even more serious concern to consider. Our adversaries are pondering the same thing on a far grander scale. This is a really, as you say, terrifying time in a way, domestically and from foreign threats, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we're all focused on the horror, understandably, at the Capitol building. Understand that I spent most of my career looking at this through the lens of our foreign adversaries. So right now in cities like Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, in North Korea, those leaders are in classified session right now discussing whether this is the moment to move against the United States, whether or not there is anyone in charge in the United States. They're seeing the lack of press conferences. They're seeing the lack of inability to repel an insurrection, and they're wondering, is this the only moment we're going to have in the foreseeable future to do whatever it is we want to do, whether it's a crippling infrastructure cyber attack, whether it's time for China to take Taiwan or for Russia to move into yet another territory. That discussion is going on right now on a global level. And then you mentioned the domestic level and the fact that all of this was foreseeable. I can't have this conversation without reminding people that we still do not have a law making it illegal to be a domestic terrorist. So if you change the religion of those angry mobsters moving into the Capitol change their religion to Islam and tell me that their ideology was violent jihad or establishing a caliphate, guess what? Not only could it have been prevented because the FBI would be lawfully allowed to go into their chat rooms and private sessions with undercover informants and electronic surveillance, but if it happened and they were caught, they would go to prison under material support to terrorism laws for 20 years to life as opposed to a trespassing charge. So it's time for us to understand we have an indigenous domestic terrorist threat and we have no law to address it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
We've been talking about that all morning. And Frank, you also bring up that we're in the midst of this widespread, biggest cyber intrusion in U.S. history from Russia. There's no indication it's over. We know Putin and the Kremlin have been celebrating what's happening in America. We know at least one of the rioters needed a Russian translator. You talk about Iran has threatened retaliation for our assassination of the general, has begun enriching uranium in response to Trump's termination of the nuclear deal. North Korea continues to build its nuclear, you talked about China watching our near total inability to deal with the virus. You said if those adversaries are inclined to undermine us with a debilitating cyber attack or our infrastructure or a deadly terror assault against U.S. interests, they will do it while they perceive no one's in charge. The lights are blinking red, you write. And they will continue to signal our vulnerability for the final 2 weeks of this leaderless administration. Our adversaries are watching. Whether or not they act on the available intelligence depends on our capacity to see what they see, a soft target that needs to secure far more than the building on the Capitol. I mean, Frank, that is the other reason he just needs to be removed immediately.
Yeah, I mean, he does have access to the nuclear codes, but you can see how I view the Capitol insurrection as simply a microcosm of a larger, softer target. So, yes, the Capitol was a soft target on the day the insurrection happened, but guess what? Our nation is now being viewed as a soft target by our adversaries, a much larger issue. And if we can get through the next 9 or 10 days, the President-elect Biden is going to have to be dealing with this threat from day one, both domestically and internationally.
Yeah, you've been saying it forever. Our biggest domestic threat is in the Oval Office, and we have never faced that before, and we cannot ring enough alarm bells. Frank, thanks so much. And I'm reading nothing but amazing reviews for The FBI Way, your new book. We feel so lucky to get you, and we'll come back when you'll come back when it's not COVID Central.